Hi guys. Okay, so we're going to be going through rehearsal number 11 and then stopping at rehearsal number 15. So this is basically in three sections. There's 11 to 12, which is basically just an extension of what we were doing yesterday. Then 12 to 13, and then 13 to 15. Now at rehearsal 12, it says mosso. There's an accelerando into rehearsal 12, and then it says mosso. So I'm going to set the tempo at rehearsal 12 at quarter note equals 80, and then it slows down at the end of that section, and then 13 is back to lento, which we're saying is quarter note equals 64. So starting at 10, it was quarter note equals 64. 12, quarter note equals 80, and then 13, quarter note equals 64. And the concerto violin soloist would lead those speed up and slow downs, and we would follow them. But for the purpose of these recordings, I'm just going to forget the accelerando and the ritenuto and just switch tempos between each section. The other thing that applies to everybody is where it says suoni reale sul A. Again, I'm not entirely sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but I believe that that means that, well, the suoni reale part, I believe, means that the pitches that are written are the pitches to be heard. So a natural harmonic, like not a fingered harmonic, so natural harmonics on the A string. Now, it's not written slurred, but the recordings that I saw, the videos, they were basically just doing natural harmonics sliding up and down and glissing up and down through the harmonic sequence at the upper part of each string. And then of course sul A would mean only on the A string, sul D would be only on the D string, sul G. And it says rapido, so rapidly, quickly, not in any sort of measured rhythm or tempo, so just up and down at random. It's more of an effect than anything else. Okay, so with that out of the way, go ahead and check the description box, click on your timestamp, and we'll get started. Okay, first violins, starting with rehearsal 11 to rehearsal 12. So like I said, this is just an extension of what we were doing in the previous section. I'll just point out a couple of things. If you're on the inside part, obviously you're starting with 3 beats of rest as opposed to a tie like you were in the previous section, and then it falls back into the same pattern. If you're on the outside part, take a look at measure 69 and 70. The bowing here, it's a little awkward. So basically, starting at 69, you're on a long up bow, right? And then you've got a down bow on the F sharp. Now, save. The best way that I found to do this is save like crazy on the up bow so that your down bow lands almost still in the upper half, and then to the tip again, and save again, and then your up bow with the accent. There's a big crescendo there, right one before rehearsal 12. So what I just wrote is above 69 and 70, I wrote all at the tip. So try to keep your bow as close to the tip as possible, because you've got to start that final up bow E at the tip so that you have room for that big crescendo. If you're on the inside part in measure 70, you're starting on a down bow on an accent on beat 3, and then you do an up bow, a staggered up bow, and you'll need to start the staggered up bow again at the tip so that you can get that big crescendo in there one before 12. Okay, so before we move on, I'm just going to play from 11 to 12, once for the outside part and once for the inside part. And this is quarter note equals 64. 2, 3, 4. And that last measure right before 12 won't actually be that long because there's an accelerando there. And then the inside part, just remember the bow lifts on the eighth notes. 4, rest, 1, 2, 3. So that's the first first section. Then this second section you guys are obviously resting for the entirety of, so you've got 8 measures. One thing to notice is the key does change here. You're in 4 flats, okay? So think about that. That would be B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat, okay? So now we're going to take a look at the last section, which is 13 to 15. This is what I was talking about at the beginning, where you're going to be sliding through all of the natural harmonic series on your A string, starting at your midway harmonic. So we're going to be sliding from, so here's your midway harmonic. We're going to be going all the way to the end of the fingerboard and then back to that midway harmonic. The reason that we're not doing like the entire string is because the notes that are indicated, it does show you that the first note is that A natural harmonic, which would be that note. So like if I played that note, if it didn't have the circle above it to indicate that it's a harmonic, it would sound like this, right? 3 on E, and then here's that as a harmonic. So that's our starting point. And all of this is going to be between that harmonic and the end of the fingerboard. It doesn't have to be super accurate or anything. Just make absolutely sure that you are not pressing your finger down to the fingerboard, because then you're going to get a slide as opposed to a series of harmonics. There is a rest on beat 1, and this is back to quarter note equals 64. So those 2 measures are just going to sound like this, taking into account that it starts at forte and goes down to pianissimo. 1, 2, 3, 4, here's 1. And that's those 2 measures. Now you want to make sure that you end on an up bow on those 2 measures so that you can be down bow 2 before 14. Then the rest of this section is just a bunch of whole notes. These are not stagger bowing, so you're just going to do 1 complete down bow for 2 measures, up for 2 measures, down for 2 measures, up for 2 measures, divisi inside outside, or top staff bottom staff starting at 14. Just make sure that you're playing the right notes. Obviously, even though we are in 4 flats here, you guys have accidentals that actually kind of excuse you from that key signature. So just, you know, sustain, all that good stuff. And that's about it. So I'm going to go ahead and play now from 13 to 15, and I'll just play the outside part. 3, 4, and rest. And that's it. Okay, have fun with this section, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for the next part. Okay, second violins. So first part would be 11 to 12. And this is just an extension of what we were doing last time. So I'm going to go ahead and play through one's for the top people, one's for the bottom people. Everything that we said before applies. Make sure you're following the bowings and the little sting accents at the top. And with the bow distribution, kind of doing a run bunny, starting at the frog, and then the tip, or vice versa. 3, 4, rest, and 2. One thing I forgot to mention, 2 before rehearsal 12, you're going to want to start that at the tip. I almost forgot. Because that up bow B, the second note of that measure, you're going to need to be as close to the tip as possible so that you have enough room to sustain and crescendo at the end of that bow. Now, it won't be as long of a note as what we're doing right now because there's an accelerando there, right? So the measure will become shorter. However, it's good practice to be able to do a sustained crescendo with a really slow bow. So here's the inside part, 11 to 12. 4, rest, and 2. same thing for the inside part, 2 before 12, start at the tip and save like crazy so that you have room for that crescendo. Okay, so now the next part would be 12 to 13. Obviously, you guys are resting for this entire thing, which is 8 measures. This is the part where we're going to speed up to quarter note equals 80. Just obviously make sure you're counting, etc., etc. The key does change here for flats, but if you'll look ahead, you guys have accidentals that cancel all of that out. So even though we are in a different key, you don't necessarily need to worry about a different finger pattern. Okay, so now this part at 13. So the first violins start with the glissandi here at 13 for the first 2 measures, and then they pass it to you for the 3rd and 4th measures. Notice that you do have a rest on beat 1, so you rest and then you start your gliss. So we're glissing through all of the natural harmonics on the D string, starting with your halfway harmonic D, because that is what's indicated as the lowest note. So that's how I'm interpreting that. So if you look at the first note that you've got, the little harmonic circle above, that's D, right? If I played it on the A string, it's the same as halfway on the D string harmonic. So, and I'm using my 3rd finger, and you're just going to be glissing with free bowing from that halfway harmonic to the end of the fingerboard and back. And hitting all of those harmonics in there. It's fun, it's different, but make sure that you are not pressing your finger all the way down to the fingerboard or pressing it down at all. If you do, you'll get a slide, and that's not what we're going for. We're looking for hearing each of those individual harmonics, which will only happen if you're using the harmonic technique, which is just lightly touching the string. If you're having trouble making them speak, remember harmonics generally take a faster, slightly heavier bow. And I know that we're going down to pianissimo here, but you can still get away with a little more weight and speed in order to get these to speak, and they won't be overpowering. Then the rest of it, 14 to 15, is just sustained whole notes that are tied. No stagger bowing here. It's going to be really soft, so just save your bow really lightly close to the fingerboard. Outside, inside, divisi, and that's it for this section. So I'm going to go ahead and play from 13 to 15, and this is back at quarter note equals 64. 2, 3, 4. And that's it for this section. Okay, so happy practicing, have fun with this, and I'll see you back here tomorrow for the next part. Okay, violas, so we're going to look at this in 3 parts. First, 11 to 12 is just an extension of what we were doing last time. There's really no change, just do be aware of 1 before rehearsal 12, so measure 71. You've got a big accelerando, so you'll need to make sure that that bow, whether you're on the outside or the inside, starts at the tip or as close to it as possible so that you can do an accent at the tip and then slow down and then do a big crescendo at the end of the bow. Obviously, measure 71 won't be as slow as we're practicing it now because theoretically the soloist will be doing an accelerando, and that measure will then be shorter as we speed up into rehearsal 12. But it's good practice to just be able to do a really slow bow crescendo, so that's what we're going to do today. So just make sure that in the measures leading up to that, you're keeping your bow in a place that will allow you to start at the tip for that final up bow. The only other thing to watch out for in this section is the little chromaticism in measures 69 and 70, especially if you're playing the top staff. You've got D sharp, so I would use, I'd probably use a high 1, but you could also do a low 2, G, F sharp, E, F natural, and then you've also got a D sharp if you're on the inside playing the bottom staff at 69, so just watch out for those. Okay, so I'm going to play through just this first part, rehearsal 11 to 12, quarter note equals 64, one's for the outside part and one's for the inside part. 3 and 4 and 1. And then the bottom staff, inside part, 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, so now let's look at the part between 12 and 13. So the violins drop out here. You guys are playing in now 4 flats. So B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat. So let's just make sure that we're catching all of those. Right at 72, you've got A flat, then A flat for those 2 measures, then B flat, then G flat at 67. So you're going to probably want to do that with a low 4 probably, or you could do a high 3 I guess. And then 78, B flat to C, and that takes you to 13. So the notes aren't difficult, you just have to make sure that you caught that key change. As far as rhythm goes, you're resting on beat 1, so rest, 2, 3, 4, 1 E and 2, 3, 4, off, rest, 2, 3, 4, 1 E and 2, 3, 4, off, etc. And make sure you're following the bowings, and this part should be just fine. So I'm just going to play now from 12 to 13. And this is quarter note equals 80 here. 3, 4, 1. In the final section, 13 to 15, this is the part with those glissandos we were talking about, glissing through the natural harmonics. The first violins start right at 13 and they have it for 2 measures. Then the second violins have it at 82 for 2 measures, and then it's passed on to you right at 14 for 2 measures. So obviously you're just holding whole notes with no stagger bowings, really soft at 13. At 14 you'll notice that there's a treble clef, so these notes are in treble clef, so the notes would be G, D, G, D. And the way that I'm reading that is just that it's going to start at your halfway harmonic G, so the G that is the first note of rehearsal 14 would be your 3rd finger first position on the D string, right? So if you find your halfway natural harmonic on the G string, it's the same note. So if you're starting there, we're going to start there and gliss to the end of the fingerboard, or as close to it as you can get, and then back to that G. So and just down and up bows stagger through that entire thing. Make sure you end on an up bow so that you can be down bow at 86. Keep in mind that when you're playing a harmonic, you want to make absolutely sure that you're not pressing your finger down, because we don't want to hear a slide here. We just want to hear those clean natural harmonics poking through when we do that harmonic fingering. And it may require a little bit of a heavier, faster bow than you're used to when you're playing pianissimo, but that's what's required sometimes to get those harmonics to speak. So now I'm going to play from 13 to 15, and we are back at quarter note equals 64. 3, 4. Rest. Okay, and that's it for this section. Really fun. So enjoy practicing, and I'll see you back here for the next part tomorrow.